Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 5th, 2025 meeting of the Cohasset Public Schools School Committee. Would all members in attendance please indicate so in roll call? Mr. Carr.
Present.
Mr. Dial is not present. Mrs. Hannah.
Present.
Mrs. Leskey.
Present.
The chair is also present, giving us a panel of 4 out of 5 members, which is a quorum. Would all who are able please rise for the recitation of our nation's pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Officially call the meeting to order and remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed by Facebook. It's being broadcast on Council 143 TV. And one can also participate virtually by accessing Zoom through the link that appears at the top of our agenda. And you can participate by utilizing the Q&A feature on Zoom. Speaking of which, the first agenda item, as always, is a public comment, and we'll provide those who are either in attendance or who are participating virtually with a moment to make public comment. Public comment is the section of the agenda, section of the meeting, reserved for comments or thoughts or questions that do not relate to something that's already on our agenda. If you have a question or comment or discussion point on something that's already on the agenda, just wait until we arrive at that point in the meeting, and we'll be happy to hear from you. So at this point, I would give a moment to those that are participating virtually to utilize the Q&A feature on Zoom and type out a comment or question. Take a few moments to do that. And we'll be periodically monitoring this as well. So if you miss your opportunity, don't worry. We want to hear from everyone. But this is the designated place that we would provide you to do that right now. Anyone here that wants to make public comment? No, everyone's attending the art show that we're about to see. Okay, I don't see any, so we'll move on. We'll move right into our invited guests. And at this time, we're welcoming Ms. Berkowitz and her students to present on a recent art project, which a few of us had the opportunity to see in progress today.
Could you give me sharing?
Oh, Ms. Moriarty's here too.
Sharing rights, because I'm going to share the
Yes, I can.
presentation.
All right. Thank you for having us. I'm Stephanie Moriarty, the department head for Visual Performing Arts. We're honored to be here tonight to present a new endeavor this year, and I'm going to be very brief because the students are more important, and we'll get right into the slideshow. But the vision was to bring to life one of the core values of our art program, which is community. And that's done through collaboration and teamwork and all these amazing things that you're going to hear from the students and see in our presentation tonight. But the goal was to engage students of all ages. We had kindergartners through 12th graders in collaborative spaces with very few rules and lots of supplies. So the mess, the laughter, the joy was incredible. And I definitely think that your meeting is far more beautiful this evening. Not that you aren't all a wonderful backdrop, but due to the final pieces created by our students. So I thank you very much for the support of many people who allowed this day to occur. And I would be remiss not to recognize the wonderful art teachers who are in the room, Ms. Berkowitz, Ms. Anthony, Ms. Helveston, Ms. Shagru, and Mrs. Schwartz, who dedicate countless hours beyond what we can see to these kids and make a difference for so many. So I would like to turn it over to Ms. Berkowitz, who will give you a more vibrant recollection of the day.
Okay, so we have a short slideshow. We'll go through it and tell you about how the day went. We advertised for this for a little while, a couple of weeks, where students, we had 81 kids accepted. Students applied by filling out a short questionnaire. The younger kids had to just answer some questions, and the older students had to write an essay about why they wanted to be part of the arts. And then they brought with them their favorite piece of art that they were most proud of to share with each other today. We obviously, Ms. Moriarty already thanked all of these people, but the cafeteria staff and the custodial staff really helped us today. The elementary kids thought that the lunch was amazing. They would not stop talking about the pizza here. These were some of the answers to some of the questions that especially the younger students wrote about why they love art. And we brought it up throughout the day. We loved that they could be creative. They went through all of our materials. They told us how it's so calming to be in a space where they can be themselves and use materials and not have to talk, and be able to talk if they want to, and be able to share with each other and be themselves. So these were some of the comments that they made in their applications. You can go to the next one. We asked them to tell us what their teachers would have said, the 3 words that described them best were. We showed them this slide actually when we presented the whole program today, but we spent the day, the idea was that kids connected with each other. So many young kids went back saying they made new friends, met older students that they connected with. I think we've got a couple of babysitting jobs lined up. But it was really, I mean, the conversations that were going on and the way that especially these kids over here were talking to the younger students. I heard them talking to them like they were their peers, and in a very appropriate way, and asking, what they love about art, what they're doing in school themselves, what they do after school, what they're going to do later. So it was that in itself, besides what they made for art today, was amazing. They talked about community. They talked about what community is to them. There were some kindergartners that came back to the room and said, "What is community?" No, like really, what is it? Like it wasn't that they couldn't define it. It was that they still needed someone to teach them about it. And it was so sweet. So they all got together. They came up with lists about what community was to them. And then on the next page, I think. So this is their brainstorming session in the morning. We did a slideshow. They broke up into groups. You can keep going. And these were the things that they said community meant to them. They were talking about their homes, their houses, their pets, who lives in their homes, who lives near their homes, who lives on their streets. And then they got bigger. What it's like to live in this town, what it's like to live in a town like this, what it's like to be part of. They did some sketches. They came up with their own ideas. Some kids did sketches that they wanted to keep. Some kids cut out pieces of those sketches that they end up using later. Some of them translated them into something else. Keep going. These were just some highlights. And then the biggest thing was that it was a mixed media project. There were really not a lot of rules. We'll go on to the rules on the next page. They had to stay within the rectangle. They could use any of the techniques that we kept giving them. So many kids kept saying they never tried this and they never tried that. One of our favorite things was, I didn't know that I could glue so many things onto a canvas. I thought it had to be paint. They went through all of our drawers and found, there are like earrings hanging on some of the pieces and turned into something different. Like it looks like it came out of the ocean and is hanging on netting. If you get close, you'll see some of that stuff. So all of the different art teachers gave different techniques. Our advanced students taught them techniques, and you can go on. The biggest rule was that you were kind to each other, listened to each other, and explored the materials. And really, they followed the rules. They had a great time. So we just celebrated upstairs with a little reception, and it had a huge turnout and a million thank yous. And we have many more pictures that you don't have to, that we didn't put up on the slideshow. So if anybody wants to see them at another part in the day. So we asked the kids at the end, we did a little culminating group session in the hallway, what their best parts of the day were. Making art with friends, working together, combining all of their creativity. At the bottom, we said, this was one of the highlights, was there were so many ideas and everybody worked off of each other's ideas, which we really liked. What did I learn today? Art can be 3D other than clay. Lots of mixed media can be used. I learned all about new tools. One of the kids talked about how they never knew you could use a paint roller as a tool in an art room. Like they were using forks and toothbrushes, and one girl was dipping a pencil in paint looking guilty, and I said, go for it. You know, like as long as you clean the pencil when you're finished. And one of the things that one of the students said that I thought was brilliant was working with the community makes our community stronger. Who knows? And these were things that they thought were really important to illustrate in their pieces, what our community specifically is. And they said family, togetherness, different ideas, inclusivity, blue and white, kindness, things that we love. There are a lot of cars and just things that kids connect to. And there was one of the highlights also that we didn't talk about putting in here was there were groups of kids taking a high school student and just talking about things they liked and then putting them in there, Taylor Swift and cars and spaceships. But it's part of their community because it's what they all agree that they love and shared with each other. And of course, another quote we liked was that there's space for everyone to be celebrated, sports, arts, and anything in between. These were things that they were proud of, everyone's excitement, every art piece that they made. They were really showing them off to their families just now, overcoming challenges. And what they were talking about was that they would get through something that wasn't working. Somebody would have an idea and they would get through it. And they had a really great time. And these were just some of the comments at the end of the day. And I wrote thank you 3 times because we got thank yous all day long. So we have one more little piece that we would like to share with you. And we have a few high school students that just wanted to read a little bit about the arts being important.
Can we have you, can we just have you come over here so we can?
So they can hear you. And I love that you want to say something on your own off the cuff.
Pull up a chair.
I just wanted to say that I really like that, like, as soon as we walked in, almost immediately every question was, can I do this? Am I allowed to do this? Can I use this? And I kind of just said, you know, you're allowed to do whatever you want because there really are no rules when it comes to art. The point is to express yourself however you feel is fit for you. And so I think that's really important to be brought into a room for the first time at a young age and to be allowed to do whatever you want with, you know, materials and resources that are very generously provided by the arts department. Yeah, I just think that was really important. And I got a lot of questions of like, am I allowed to do this? Like I said, and I kind of just gave them a creative liberty to just do whatever they wanted because I think that's really important in developing minds and kind of being able to have an outlet to express yourself. Because that's what I do. But yeah, so research consistently highlights the significant importance of art education in schools. Studying art can positively impact student engagement, academic achievement, creativity, critical thinking, self-esteem, and overall well-being. Art education can foster collaboration, cultural understanding, and problem-solving skills across various disciplines. We would like to share some key findings from research conducted by the National Endowment for the Arts regarding art in schools.
I also agree with Sadie. I think it just gives you like a bigger sense of like independence as well. Just, I don't know, as a child, you don't have a lot of freedoms and just getting that little bit is really important. My little reading here, improved academic performance, studies of length increased arts education with higher test scores, better writing abilities, and improved academic achievement across subjects, including math and science.
I'll add on again to this kind of, I guess for me in my life, it's kind of fitting to this up here at a school committee. I am somebody who definitely looks towards creativity when it comes to critical thinking, things like that. And I do kind of wish sometimes that I had more opportunities like this to learn in an environment that's more artistic. Like I love music. I do a lot of music in my free time. Had I done that more in my life, I feel like I might have enjoyed learning almost more. Not that I did enjoy it. Things like that. Just yeah, this enhanced creativity and critical thinking. Engaging in art activities encourages students to think creatively, explore different perspectives, and develop problem-solving skills, which are valuable in all areas of life.
I also want to add on to what I was saying, just because Grayson sparked something, that I think that like when I saw the reactions to telling them that they had the liberty to do whatever they'd like with whatever they'd like, it was almost really not emotional, but it was really eye-opening to see the sparkle in their eyes that I had from such a young age and that I still carry with me. And to kind of like see that for the first time in young artists is really important because art is changing rapidly, and there isn't a big portion of people who are really interested and really passionate about art and pursuing that. And I think that giving that to them today was really important. Yep.
Okay, well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. So we felt the support today and the love, and I hope they felt it because they were rock stars. So
Well,
thank you for giving us the
Does anyone have
space.
any questions for any of our students about the experience? Anyone? Any, you can fire at will, any of the committee members? Any comments, anything?
I
So-
just have
Go ahead.
no.
I have a goofy job. I have to keep notes. Will you introduce yourself?
I'm Sadie Spear.
Isabella Bash.
Grayson Corbett.
Ah, very cool. You got to do more of this.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Mrs. Leskey, you guys?
I just want to give like applause, amens all around. 100%, these are the things that we need to be doing for our kids. I love the approach that you brought. That was, I mean, I think when you said you were like emotional about kids like lighting up when knowing that they had freedoms to use their own sort of creativity around materials and
outlet, yeah.
tools. I'm emotional about that because I think that they should be learning that when they are in preschool,
Yeah,
kindergarten, all the way through, and that really making that a sort of hallmark of arts education is the freedom to make decisions and to use your creativity and to think critically. And those things are so connected, and I'm just major applause. So excited. This was, I hope, the tip of an iceberg of a sort of movement forward for the district. And thank you for being sort of leaders, peer leaders. And I think that multi-age creation and teaching and learning is also incredibly important. So I'm just tickled pink. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Oh, that was a colorful little, no. Unintentional.
Can I ask a question that I kind of know the answer to, but I think it would be great to share is, first of all, what the public can't see is the actual artwork that is here in front of us, which is amazing. So we're gonna make sure that we get that out, probably on our Facebook page and photos of that. But what's happening with all
Yes,
this
thank you.
beautiful
I
art?
realized that we didn't
Yes.
say. We made 6 pieces to be hung in all of the public schools indefinitely, until it, for whatever reason, it's time to move on. But the kids are waiting to find out which one is going to be in their school. And we have 2 that maybe one could go down to the
Could we have
central
someone-
office and maybe one could be in the Learning Commons, or maybe they find a place in town. I don't know, but maybe that's your conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And how are they being assigned or chosen, or is that up to,
It's a good question.
okay? Because we want to make sure the public can see them, because they're amazing.
Yeah, we were impressed too.
That anchored to pictures.
Yes.
Oh, good.
So just so you know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Thank you.
So thanks to everyone that was involved in this and you guys for, your courage coming up and speaking about it. Total win-win situation, right? Because each of you got some value out of it. And I know that the kids did, I saw them. And it's just generally cool to be around older kids, right? We all thought that when we were younger. And you can tell that was the case in there. It was like a little bit more, the students were acting more as the teachers than the actual teachers were. And that in and of itself, I think maybe extends a little bit of independence, right? But also I think that this experience speaks volumes, and to which Berkowitz and Moriarty already know, but how important the arts are, and how we all have different interests and, different outlets to express ourselves. So it's important that we never forget how important the arts are. Sometimes we'll be, maybe over-focused on ELA or, math, science, the academic realm or athletic realm. But, the arts are super important too, and not just visual arts, music as well, performing arts, all of it. So thank you guys so much. It was super interesting to hear your perspective, and I found it really interesting. So thank you so much for presenting this. And yeah, we can't wait to display all these. I'll just note that, so when I was asking one of the students, I think she's like a fifth grader, what, maybe she was fourth grader. She was doing this one over here, and the people that are participating virtually can't see, but I asked them like, I didn't know what the assignment was, right? So I was asking them what was the deal, like, oh, we're supposed to be creating this, representation of our community. And so they're pointing out some things, and I was like, oh, and like, you've got some mountains here. They're like, yeah, that's someone climbing Everest. And I was like, oh, and like, because it's awesome. It's like, that's great, so it was fun, to see, just again, like, right, like whatever's on their mind, like no rules, right? So I just thought that was kind of funny. So thank you so much. A big round of applause for our. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, and all our principals were here in support as well. I see Principal Mills from the middle school, Principal Sullivan from our Deer Hill School, Principal Gaudette from Osgood, and Principal Scott from our school. Thank you. What's that? Yes, you guys are going to have to do that. Indeed,
I
yes.
think we should do like a road show, and they go to all the buildings for a while.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
nice idea.
So that all the kids can see them.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Okay, so before we move on, Ms. Crimmins, if you want to,
Yeah.
there aren't going to be more in-person visitors. So if you want to take a seat at the table, there's space for you now. If you want to come and sit up
I
here.
thought that was Cheryl's job.
Well, is she still here?
No, she left. Karen and I were gonna go caucus before the closed session.
That's
If
fine.
okay. We
Just
can start next
making
week.
good on our promise. So,
Thank
okay.
you so much.
All right, the seat's available whenever you want it. So we'll move into the next block of our agenda, which is budget resources and governance, block D. We're going to start that with a presentation from Open Architects, which is an outside consultant that we engaged recently. I'll turn the meeting over to our superintendent of schools, Ms. Sarah Shannon, to introduce that portion of our meeting. Ms. Shannon.
Okay, thank you very much. So, yes, we have been talking about the Open Architects report, and so we have TJ Plant here with us from Open Architects. He is going to spend a little bit of time tonight reviewing some of his findings, strengths, areas that need to be addressed, and then some recommendations for us. And so he will present, and then there'll be opportunities to ask him questions. So, TJ, you're all set to?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Thank you, Superintendent. So my name's TJ Plant. I work for a consulting and data company, Open Architects. And we were tasked to kind of look at some risk assessments related to the finances. And so today I'm going to present on some of the areas that have been really strong and some of the areas that may need some improvement. But just by way of background, I have about 25 years experience in public sector finance. I've been a school CFO, I've been a municipal CFO, and I've worked in the State House, Senate Ways and Means for a number of years. So I have a broad-based background, and I've been working closely with the superintendent on this. We have interviewed, in my count, at least 15 people on both town and school side to kind of gauge where Cohasset Public Schools are. So I will just kind of dive in, the strengths. I think the first strength that we've noticed is that there's a improved collaboration between the town and the schools, and that is monthly meetings that started, I believe, back when you started superintendent, with the town manager, the board of selectmen, school committee, and other folks that may need to be part of those meetings. And I think that is a huge step forward to be able to communicate the challenges that Cohasset schools are facing. But more importantly, it trickled down to the departments because in our conversations with all the various departments, it trickled down to the collaboration that both the town and the schools want to do together, whether it's HR, whether it's payroll, whether it's benefits, whether it's any of those things, which is fantastic because that's opening up the lines of communication and kind of getting the schools and the town on the same page as it relates to that. There's challenges, and I'll get to those in a minute, but just by way of, it's not lost on this group because there is definitely a challenge related to FY25's budget and the potential deficit. So I know that's not lost, but the spending freeze was put into place on November 1st, and that is not easy to do in a school district as you're trying to educate kids. But sometimes it's a little necessary to try to stop the bleeding and make sure that you kind of find solutions. You run a lean budget. There aren't a lot of frills in the budget. It's just kind of covers exactly what Cohasset schools need. But you have strong processes, internal processes, both on the town and on the school side, which is huge to make sure that you have the resources you need and that you're, and like, I'll use an example, like the process to onboard is pretty tight on both sides, how you get folks hired and through the process, and benefits are strong. There's very low risk in the benefits area. The town does a good job on behalf of the schools. So that student services, I can't say enough about how impressed we were with student services and their projections and how accurate they were based upon what their needs are or their budget needs are. So, I mean, those are definitely huge strengths. And I don't know, Superintendent, if I missed a couple, but those are the big ones in my mind.
Yep.
Challenge-wise, I'm just going to focus on the ones that are we would say critical or high based upon our experience in open architects and our experience in the industry. The first one is long-term planning and multi-year financial planning. There isn't really a lot of everything seems to be short-term and trying to put out fires rather than long-term looking at everything. And that's something that creates a challenge for, and we'll get to that too. Collective bargaining creates a challenge for some of the unforeseen circumstances. It creates a challenge for, making sure you can align staffing to the budget. And that has been kind of a big challenge for Cohasset, is just making sure that your FTEs match your budget, match your needs, and long-term what that looks like. And that a recommendation at the end will be something related to that. And then looking at there's definitely, I know Cohasset goes after a lot of grants, and Cohasset does not necessarily win a lot of grants. And that's a challenge, but I give kudos to the team that keep trying to find alternative funding sources to help the students of Cohasset. So the next one is, we look at a domain of like, how do you deal with unforeseen budget circumstances? And right now, between the last couple of years, CPS has had some challenges. You've tapped out your resources, and now you're facing a potential deficit for fiscal 25. and you don't have a lot of, we call them blueberry pots, like a place to go and find money to solve a problem. And there aren't a lot of places to go. So we consider that a pretty high risk, and that, we don't want to create further strain. And we know FY26 is already going to pose a challenge. And I know I've had conversations with many folks in Cohasset about it for now that we know the governor's number, but we can kind of work through some of that stuff. And I know we met with the town as well. But yeah, so there's definitely some challenges as you don't have like circuit breaker. You've had to deplete your version of circuit, or not version, but your appropriation of circuit breaker to balance the budget. So you don't, like, in our world, circuit breaker, if you can be strategic enough, you push it out a year because you get it for 2 years. And if you have the ability, but right now, you've had to tap into all of your resources and the town's resources to solve 24's problems, and you're probably going to tap into some resources for 25. The other one is position control and hiring. Position control is probably a big one. There's no clear position control, and that really comes down to how do you make sure you have the FTEs you need, and how do you make sure you account for them and their salaries and project out into the remainder of the fiscal year, plus also future fiscal years, and taking into account collective bargaining and what that looks like. And so there's a lot of that. It's done on spreadsheets right now, which is we call shadow systems, and it doesn't need to sound shady, but like when you don't have a clear system, and I'm gonna get to an ERP system, but yeah, so there's definitely like everyone seems to be doing what they can do with the systems that they have. There's disparate systems. So there's a lot of systems that we can kind of pull together, and I'll get into that in a minute. And then the final high risk category, and this is certainly not lost on anyone in this room, is that the collective bargaining agreements that are coming up in June. And I think everyone's seen what's going on around the Commonwealth between the strikes and the just sheer amount of requests from the unions and the sustainability of what both the schools and or the town can afford. And that poses a risk to Cohasset. And I have no idea what the bargaining strategy is going to be, but we just know if the town can only afford a certain amount, and you are being requested for higher than that, and you're trying to do higher than that, then it just requires other budgetary decisions. So that's the update. The recommendations in our minds is an enterprise system, an ERP system that kind of pulls together all your payroll and position control and all these other things into one system. And it doesn't have to be what is known as Munis. Munis is the big one that's kind of around that most cities, towns, and school districts use, but it's a similar system like that, where you have a contract module, you have the requisition process with proper workflow, you have all these different, and you pull everything together. So it's not 4 or 5 different systems. Position control, just pull that out by itself. That is huge. Just so you know, your vacancies, how many positions you need to fill in terms of, or you want to fill based upon the budget. And you make sure that HR and payroll are talking to each other through a system like that. Right now, spreadsheets are fine, but it does pose a little risk if they're not updated in timely enough fashion to really understand the needs. Because I mean, everyone here understands that trying to educate students trying to run a school system and educate students is really the top goal, and you're not trying to generate a surplus and, generate free cash, what's known as free cash in the municipal side. And it's really trying to make sure you understand where you're at so you can reinvest the funds quickly to make sure you're maximizing education. So that's kind of an issue. Budget planning, making sure that your budget process is sound. I know, Superintendent, you're presenting tonight on the budget tonight. And then a multi-year financial plan is looking back 3 years and then out 3 to 5, depending on what you want, just to have a sense. And it doesn't need to be 100% accurate. It just needs to have enough information to kind of know where you're heading. So when you go into negotiations or when you go into contract negotiations with a vendor, or when you have a spike in something you're not aware of, you can just know like what that's going to mean long term.
I just ask you to try and wrap up in the next 2 minutes because
Nope. I was just about to say, I am absolutely looking at my notes and I am done. So,
Okay. All right, perfect. That works too. Any members of the committee have any questions for Mr. Plant relative to anything he just presented? All right.
Excellent work.
So, Mr. Plant, I do have a question. You mentioned some of your recommendations. Is there a recommended next step, like in terms of, doing a deep dive into the actual numbers, the financials? And if so, is that costing the district extra to do that, to have Open Architects do that? If so, how much?
So I don't have a number if there's anything. I did have a quick conversation with the superintendent earlier today that if your data that comes from SoftWrite is, I won't say clean, but easy to maneuver, like if you can get it out into an Excel spreadsheet and we can kind of manipulate it and do a payroll projection on your behalf, and then do a PO projection or a encumbrance projection, like that's probably going to be minimal, if at all. Like if we could probably manipulate that and turn something around with relative speed. If the data is harder to mine the data or get it out of the system, then we might have a different conversation. But I would love for us just to send you a data request and get the information and then see what that looks like and then have a further conversation.
Okay, that'd be helpful. And those two processes that you described, would that be trying to target areas of waste or redundancy to try and identify areas that we may be able to realize some level of savings and mitigate our current shortfall?
Yes, that's the hope. The hope is the latter, is to say, okay, we're going to tighten up a payroll projection based upon all the collective bargaining agreements, based upon the salaries, based upon the assumptions in the budget, and then do that for salaries, and then do that for the OT, we call OTP, other than personal services, the below the salary line, and try to figure out that there's areas that can just kind of grab some savings. Will it solve the whole problem? I'm not sure, but at least we can tighten up the budget.
Okay, well, we'll be interested in exploring that next step with you. So we'll get back to you on the platform, whether it's going to be easy to extract that data as you just described. And if so, then, we'll be looking forward to seeing what, if any, extra costs that may be for the district. So thank you so much for your presentation and for your attendance here tonight, Mr. Plant.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along into the primary budget presentation, Superintendent Shannon.
Share my screen. So the information you just heard from TJ was really looking at this current year. What I'm about to present is looking forward to FY26, which is the 25-26 school year. I'm trying to accomplish a little bit of two things in this presentation, because I think that there are a lot of people interested in our budget for next year. So I'm trying to, one, educate folks on how schools are funded and how we specifically look to fund our schools and what we are looking to do for next year, because we have been 2 years in a row running at a deficit, and we need to create a FY26 budget that is a balanced budget, that is fiscally responsible. I will preface this with, it's a bit hard to give firm number information for this coming school year because there are a lot of unknowns. Some of those unknowns are, we're unsure where the governor's budget is going to land. So the governor's budget just came out, her first draft, that still has to go through its process. And then the town will know exactly what numbers come out of the governor's budget that benefits the town. The other thing, and Mr. Plant alluded to this, is that we are currently in negotiations with all 5 of our unions. And so it's really hard to predict where we will land in terms of salary increases for the staff. And so we had to build a budget not quite knowing what that real number will be. And then the other thing we're going to talk about is, there's 2 ways to close a budget shortfall. One is to reduce, but the other is to increase revenue. And so you'll see in this presentation where there are opportunities to increase revenue through different areas there are different ways of doing that, through fees and through other things. So this is a draft FY26 budget, is the first attempt. We are looking to, as we come back each time to talk about budget, have more firm information. And we're also looking to continue to collaborate and partner with folks as we try and think about how we continue to solve this problem as we move forward. So just a few context setting items. So our budget is really designed to help us meet our mission, vision, and core values as a district. We are a district that puts students first. So this is a budget that puts students first. It is a budget that is designed to help us meet our vision of a graduate. And it is guided by our FY26 budget priorities. We shared and you approved our budget priorities a couple months ago. And these are really based on our goals and the former strategic plan, that many of those themes will be through lines into the new strategic plan as well. It's also designed to help move us into the future. As we have been working on the feasibility study at the middle school and high school level, we've been talking about what we want education to look like in the Cohasset Public Schools in the future. It's not, that work hasn't just been what does it look like at the middle school and high school, it's also what does it look like across the entire district. One of the things that our current budget has worked towards is creating opportunities for students that we don't want to see dismantle. We want to continue to move forward with those and enhance them. And this is a budget that is really trying to prioritize some of those things and maintain some of what makes us so great. So it's a long process to design a school budget. Takes the better part of a year, actually. We start talking about the budget in the fall. Mr. Plant alluded to the fact that Chair McClellan and I have been meeting with the town manager and the chair of the select board monthly to keep on track of where we are budgetarily. I've been meeting with all of our principals and our directors to think about what the different budgets look like, where there is room to potentially make reductions, where there is opportunity to increase revenue. And we worked together on January 21st, so a combination of our administrative leadership team with members of the school committee. And that was really a great session because we talked about a lot of things and some creative ideas came out of that. I really feel strongly that our teachers are the backbone of our school district, and I think they see a lot of things. And so I presented this budget presentation to them on Monday in different forums, a secondary forum and an elementary forum. And, you know, asked them what their ideas were. One, I think this impacts them on their day-to-day basis in a really real way, but also where do they see some efficiencies? And they're in some ways still thinking about that, but in other ways, some ideas came forward that actually have landed in this presentation. So we're grateful for their collaboration in this effort. Today is our first preliminary budget presentation to you. We will continue to discuss this over the next few meetings. There will likely be a joint school committee and select board and advisory meeting with a public budget hearing on March 19th. And then on April 2nd will be the day that you as a school committee vote for our budget so that we can bring it forward to town meeting on May 12th. And that's when our budget is finally truly set and approved. There are several types of budgets that exist within a school department and in any organization, even families, right? And so you can have a fully funded budget that is everything, all your hopes and dreams. And I'm going to talk about what that could include for us in a minute. You can have a level service budget. That means that you have the exact same level of service that we provide for students currently. And that everything we have this year is paid for in full for next year. You can also have a level funded budget, meaning you get X amount of money in FY25, which is our current school year, and we're going to give you that exact same amount of money for FY26. We know that already we don't have enough money in FY25, so it definitely wouldn't be enough money for us in FY26. So really that level funded budget becomes a reduction budget for us. And so we really are in a place where we need to reduce, but you'll see that we are looking to actually lessen that shortfall through a variety of ways outside of just reductions. And there are very specific drivers that force us to make decisions when we're designing our budget. And some of those are contracted salaries, special education costs, facilities and maintenance, class size, course offerings, transportation, and fees. And most of our money is in contracted salaries, but you heard Mr. Plant talk about those other things. Those other things do make a difference in our budget. And so talking about what our budget breakdown is, the majority of our budget is salaries. It is really over 80% of our budget. And a lot of these other areas, while there are things like professional development where we have the opportunity to make reductions, but like utilities, we don't have any real control over what utilities charge us. And so there are some of these where we have some ability to make an impact and some where we don't. And so, like I said, 84% of our school budget is salary. And there are two types of contracts. There are personal service contracts and there are union contracts across the entire district. There are 24 personal service contracts and we have 5 union contracts. And all 5 of those union contracts will expire at the end of this current school year. And we will be and are currently in negotiations with all of them for the 25-26 school year. And for anyone who's curious, how does that 84% of budget salaries break down? This is how it breaks down. And, you know, we are nothing without our educators and without the folks in this district who are supporting our students because every adult in this building supports our students in some way. Special education costs also play into our budget. We have a variety of special ed services that I'll talk a little bit more about. We have actually a really nice continuum of service here in Cohasset for being such a small district. And we are continuing to think about how we expand that continuum of service. But one thing that does come out a lot is the out-of-district costs for Cohasset students. We have several really amazing members of our Cohasset community who need to be educated in a different setting. And so we provide that per their IEP, and their special education team makes those decisions. But there's this group that's called the Operational Service Division, and they help set rates for those out-of-district tuitions. And you heard Mr. Plant talk about how we had to use 2 years worth of circuit breaker funding in order to cover some of our special education costs. The reason for that is because in FY24, out-of-district tuitions went up 14%. There is no school district that had planned for and prepared for that or had that kind of money set aside. And then in FY25, those costs went up another 4%, and they are expected to go up 3.67% again for FY26. And so we need to continue to educate our students, and we have to figure out how to pay for those out-of-district tuition costs. And as those costs went up, so too did the cost of out-of-district transportation. So we're trying to figure that out, and not to sound flip, but every district is trying to figure that piece out too, because it was unexpected. And so as we look at special education, this is a really nice list of all of the services that we offer across the district. We are continuing to build programming so that we can better support some of our out-of-district students in our own district. But it takes time to build programs. And so, feel very fortunate that Mr. Stapleton has started to think about what types of programming could we create. But that doesn't happen overnight, and that could take a few years to get off the ground. But it's something that we are looking forward to thinking more about and designing how we would strategically bring some of that programming to the district. Facilities and maintenance, I alluded to this. Some of those costs, we are actually using fewer utility resources, yet our costs continue to go up. So that's where some of this is outside of our control. A year or so ago, the district did some work in all of the schools so that we could reduce our usage, and that has played out. We just aren't seeing the monetary savings because of inflation. We also, as a district, do more around our school grounds than we used to, and so that is costing the district more money in terms of custodial overtime and some routine maintenance costs and some routine materials fees. Class size is really important in Cohasset, and this was an interesting thing for me to look at and learn. This is a district that really prides itself on its smaller class size, and I think it's really important. I think it's part of what makes us who we are. I think it's part of why we are really doing a good job at starting to close those achievement gaps. But you can see that over time, the total number of students in the district is going down. And when I first shared this slide deck, I actually had fewer years on here. And somebody who's been in the district for a very long time said, can you really go back and look at all the numbers? Because most of us who've been here a long time knew that there was going to be this big bubble in the middle, and then we were going to start dropping again. And so I did that, and that person was absolutely correct. That is exactly what I found. And so to me, this speaks to that long-term financial planning that Mr. Plant was talking about. We have a service, NESDEC in New England. They provide 10 years of enrollment data. They project out. And so I think we can do a better job using what they provide to think about what our student numbers will look like as we move forward and do some more planning of our financial planning in years 3 to 5. But this is our current class sizes for this current school year. And you can see that we have really nice class sizes. And so when we talk about some of the things that make us an amazing and excellent school district, this is something that even though we're trying to close this deficit, that we are trying to not impact. And as a matter of fact, in a minute, I'm going to talk about the fact that we also, even though we are going to be making reductions, we are going to, through some reimagining of some staffing, increase the number of classrooms you see for grade 4 next year, because that 125 students is coming up to 4th grade, and 5 classrooms would mean that we have about 25 students in a class, which is higher than what we typically like in Cohasset. And, you know, in talking to Principal Sullivan, those are some grades where we typically see move-ins every summer. And so we also want to be prepared and have a little bit of space in each classroom. Another thing that really makes us special is all of our course offerings. We are a district that really provides a comprehensive core curriculum all the way through pre-K through 12. And we are a district that you just saw the evidence of our placing value on the arts. That's special and it's important because we know that that makes well-rounded children. We know it adds to the academic experience, and we know that for some students, art and music and phys ed are places where our students feel like they have a sense of belonging. And we want to make sure that all of our students have that place. We also have a really aligned and growing technology and computer science curriculum. We offer 2 languages, 6 through 12. I know that many want us to offer down into the lower grades. Right now, we're still 6 through 12. We offer great STEM programming, K through 12. And we have an increasing catalog of electives for students at the high school that are really aligned to our vision of a graduate and our strategic plan. Transportation, it's always an area of struggle for us a little bit. We do have 8 buses. They are leased. Part of the cost for our leased buses is actually supported by capital budget, and part of them currently is supported by operating budget. And so we're continuously trying to think about how that split happens. And we do charge students fees, but we can't charge all of our students fees. We are by law required to provide transportation for our elementary students and students who live beyond a certain 2 miles. And so we can really only charge for those students who fall outside of those areas. And so this is an area that I'm going to ask that we look at in a little bit. To see if there's some room to bring in some additional revenue, or if we want to keep it as it is. And fees in general, there are a lot of other fees that we do and we do not currently charge that we are going to be looking at. Currently, we have fees through athletics, transportation, building rentals, and some other fees to look at and consider are student parking, activity fees, preschool, and full day kindergarten. And so how do we get all of our money? I think that's a big question for people. Some of it is revenue, like I just talked about with the fees. We also, you heard Mr. Plant talking about grants. I think Dr. Scollins does an amazing job applying for grants. Often our district doesn't meet the qualifications for those grants, and so we are not awarded them, even though we are applying for them. And I'll explain a little bit of why we don't often qualify for them. And so I think we're starting to really look outside of the typical grants to see what we could access. We just heard actually this week that we are recipients of a National Science Foundation grant. So that is like an example of the kinds of grants we need to start going for. But the vast majority of our funding comes from Chapter 70, which I'll explain a little bit more about because I think a lot of people hear about Chapter 70 but don't understand what it is, and town appropriations. And from the town, they give us money that supports our operating budget. In addition to that, they provide capital funding. They have appropriated money for our school facility stabilization fund, and they often give us one-time funding appropriations when they can. So Chapter 70 was designed to give and assure fair and adequate minimum per student funding for public schools in the state of Massachusetts by defining a foundation budget and a standard of local funding that every city and town had to give to the schools. The amount of Chapter 70 funding is based on 6 different factors. The foundation budget, that's the part that comes from the state, and that is based on our student enrollment. It's based on a wage adjustment factor. So they use the mean or median of home prices to figure that out, and inflation. The hard part here is 2 things. One, our student enrollment has gone down, which means we are eligible for less Chapter 70 money, but also their inflation rate doesn't keep up with what our rising costs are. So it is always less than what we need. And then the other part of our funding comes from local contributions, what the town gives us, and they base their ability to provide us with money through property value, income, and municipal revenue growth factor. Cohasset is a wonderful community, but almost all of the town income comes from property values and property taxes because we have a very small commercial base. Many other towns have a large commercial base, and that adds to the amount of money that they can give to the schools. One of the things I have found through this whole learning process of our budget is that our town does everything it can to really fund the schools. But they only get so much money. And so that's where we're a little bit stuck. And even as a town and in conversations, it's, they can't give us enough to keep up with inflation either. And so at what point do we have to think about what are some other alternatives here to help us get to what we need? And the reason we don't get the same amount of state Chapter 70 money is because of these italicized categories, numbers 8 through 12. What Chapter 70 does is it says these are the 13 categories of students, and numbers 1 through 7, we're going to give everybody the exact same amount. But for numbers 8 through 13, we're going to give those numbers more money. So for instance, a school district that has multilingual learners who are in the hundreds, if those students are being given $10,000 extra per student, they're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars more. A district like Cohasset has about 3 to 5 multilingual language students. That's a big difference. And it's also why we're not qualifying for a lot of grants, because many of those grants are awarded based on the numbers of students that you have in these categories 8 through 13. And we as a district, we don't have those numbers to qualify. And so when you hear on the news that Governor Healy has given more money to Chapter 70, she has. But because of those italicized numbers I just showed you, most of that money is going to other districts. As a town, we may get about $105,000, but as a district, we're only going to see about half of that. Because the town takes the other, and I don't mean to say takes, but that's the way it's supposed to work. Half of it goes to the town, half of it comes to us. And so some of that information also factors into our per pupil expenditure. And we are on the higher end of per pupil expenditure because it doesn't necessarily translate in the sense that because we're a smaller district, we have fewer expenses and we don't spend as much money. Every school still has to have the same amount of staffing in some ways, the same, you still need to have a principal in every school, you still need to have a director of student services. So those needs don't change based on the number of students necessarily. And so that's why when you take those needs that are common across all districts and you divide it by the number of students we have a higher per pupil expenditure because we have fewer students. And yet that per pupil expenditure still doesn't meet our actual costs as a district. So where are we currently? I think this is important. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this current year's budget, but it's important to note that last year's or this current year's FY25's voted budget amount was just under $24 million. And I think that's an important number for the public to hold in their head, because when we talk about any percentage increase that the town gives us over FY25, that's the number that the percentage is factored on. So while they also gave us an additional one-time special ed costs, and while we have funds that are offset by circuit breaker, those numbers aren't factored into what our foundation budget is for FY25. That will help us determine what our FY26 numbers are. And as you can see here, even though that we ended up with just over 24 million, our costs for FY25 are 25 million, which is why we have our shortfall. So if we were to look at a fully funded budget for next year, and I think this is important because I think people should see what is possible and then what we're doing. If we, this is if someone came and said, hey, Cohasset Public Schools, you have an additional $10 million. What do you want to do with it? We would add a grade 4 teacher. We would add another school adjustment counselor at the elementary level so that each elementary school had 2 full-time adjustment counselors. We would add assistant principals to our elementary schools. We would add some additional electives at the high school, and we would add to our professional development money. And all of these are things that have been identified for the last few years as needs and potential increases for the district.
Not necessarily a comprehensive list.
Right, there are other things. But even just these would require over a 10% increase from our FY25 numbers. And so it's not feasible, it's not fiscally responsible. If we looked at just a level service budget, which means the exact same services that we have this year, nothing changes, we would still need at least an additional 6.8%. And I say at least because I think it's important to reiterate that none of these numbers include any negotiated salary increases. We just don't know what those will be yet. A level funded budget, as I said earlier, would still leave us short $1.128 million. And it would require us to do some of what we're going to propose that we do. And so what are we actually proposing for this year? It's a little bit of a combination of all of those things. So if the town, again, and the other thing is because the state doesn't know what all of their budget's going to look like, the town doesn't exactly know what it has available yet either. And they're playing with some unknowns. We've had lots of conversations with Chris Senior, the town manager, who is being told that health insurance costs are going to rise between 10 and 20%. That's a huge span. And until he knows what those numbers are for real, he doesn't necessarily know what number he's working with as a town. So if we just assume a 4% increase on our FY25 budget, which was that 23 million number, we would get around $950,000 from the town over and above what we have. That gets us to, $24,865,000. But we know that that's not enough because this year we already have spent 25 million. So we know that at a minimum, with no negotiated increases, we would need an additional $670,000. we are making a guess that when you add in salary increases, we may need to find about $1.2 million. And so how are we gonna get there? This is our proposal for how we get to the $1.2 million. Some of that is potential salary and supply reductions to the tune of about $575,000. We would like to not go deeper into our reduction of staff than what that reflects. And we're not quite ready to share exactly what positions those are because it could shift based on some different factors. But what I can share with people is that we worked really hard to first look at non-student facing positions because we really are trying so hard not to impact what happens in the classroom. And every position impacts students in some way, but not as a not in the way that like it would up class sizes or change the number of classes at, say, a third grade level.
Just to be clear, Superintendent Shan,
Yeah.
this would reduce the amount of human resources that we have at Cohasset Public Schools. And some of those may very well be student-facing positions if deemed necessary.
Yes.
So it's something that everyone needs to prepare for in the event that it is unavoidable. And it's not something that we take lightly, nor is it something that, you know, we want to do. We want to keep the positive momentum we have, and certainly reduction of human resources can cause us to lose momentum. But, you know, I just want to make it clear what that line item is. That would be staff, people that work at this district that would no longer be working here. So everyone needs to understand how serious the situation is, you know, should we need to resort to that.
Yeah, and I think sort of to add to that is that as we look at some of these areas of potential revenue, if any of these were not voted upon by you to increase some of those fees, or we weren't able to get this one-time special ed cost of $350,000 again, then the number of staff reductions would actually have to grow. Because no matter what, we have to get to that right amount so that we are moving forward with a balanced budget. And there's only two ways to do that. So I am gonna move into potential areas of fees that we could talk about. And again, this is a first pass and there's lots of conversation to have about all of these. So everything that people are gonna see, this is just a first blush. And there'll be multiple meetings where all of these are talked about. But, and one of the things to talk about is kindergarten fees. In FY25, the district moved from requiring families to pay $3,000 fee for full day kindergarten. And when that happened, the town supported that transition with one-time funds to cover the costs of the kindergarten fees. But that cost wasn't necessarily absorbed into the budget in a way that also then reduced somewhere else for a break even. And so on the table would be to reinstitute the full day kindergarten fee to offset approximately $300,000 if you chose to go back there and if it was $3,000 a student still. Talked a little bit about transportation fees. This is another area to look at. We are currently almost at the highest transportation fee. Hingham just voted for FY26 to increase their fee to $360 per student with a family cap of $625. We're currently at $350 with a family cap of $590 and a late fee of $50. If we were to increase our fees to $400, it would potentially bring in an extra $27,000. If we went to $425, it could bring in an additional $39,000. And if we went to $450, it could bring in an additional $55,000. Athletic fees, we are not near the top in our athletic fees, so this is an area where we could increase fees. There's a little bit more room here. One of the proposals that we're making is that we actually create 2 tiers of fees. Many districts have 2-tier fees for athletics. So tier 1 would be, instead of a $250 fee, it would be $350 with a family cap of $1,400. Based on our current, this is a little bit of a combination. We used this year's fall and winter actual numbers with last year's spring numbers to try and come up with what our numbers of students are. So that would be 360 students paying the fee with an increased revenue of $57,000. Tier 2 fees would be hockey, swim, and football because those are sports that actually cost the district a lot more money. With hockey, we're also renting space at the ice arena. Swim, we're renting space at the pool. And football, there's a pretty big charge because every year we have to recertify the helmets and pads, which costs over $12,000 a year. And so the proposal is that those fees would go up to $500 with a family cap of $22,000. There are about 91 students between those 3 sports, which brings us to an additional potential of $23,750. There's also a caveat here that the ski team would stay at the 3 or go to the 350 rate, but those students would be responsible for buying their own ski pass at Blue Hills. And though the total here is $80,000, we also in 2023-24 had families who reached the cap, which saved them, but reduced the district income by $17,000. So we took that out. So if we did this proposed increase fee for athletics, it would bring in approximately $67,000 or $64,000. We also looked at gate fees. Gate fees are what we charge folks who come to games. And we don't charge for all games. We charge for some of the sports that cost more money through building use or additional refs or expensive refs. And we did an analysis of other towns and what their gate fees are. And we actually are very much in line with what other districts are doing. So we're not actually proposing an increase in gate fees, but we thought it was important for people to know that we gain about $40,000 in gate fees each year. This is a proposal that actually came out of staff feedback and had some conversation as a leadership team around the idea of proposing a student activity fee. And for a couple of reasons. One is that we've been hearing from students that we don't get enough attendance of students at each other's games and sporting events. And perhaps one of the things we could do is actually not charge each time they come to an event. And that might improve their attendance, improve school culture. It could potentially also reduce our revenue. But the counter proposal to that was to have a yearly activity for students that includes gate fees, clubs, and other non-sport activities. What it would not include are activities that serve as fundraisers and school dances, because that money goes to either that fundraising cause, like a trip, or it goes to student council. And so the proposal is that it would be $60 per student at the middle school and $100 per student at the high school.
Include theater though, right?
No, people would still pay to go see plays. Yeah. We also talked about student parking fees. We did a little survey again of surrounding towns, and almost everybody does charge for student parking. Milton did not, but they are talking about doing it for next year, just as we are. And so we are proposing that students would pay $2 a day to park at the high school, which would bring, it would be about $360 per year. That would bring in about $41,000 to the district. And we are talking about this in addition to moving our buses from the lot over by Abishon, where we currently pay $48,000 to lease that space, bringing the buses back to the high school location where they would park here overnight. We are working with the town to find a place that they could be during the school day so that we don't lose student parking spots, and hopefully get the best of both worlds where students are helping us defray the costs by paying for parking, and we save the $48,000 from bus, parking fees over on the edge of town. We are also proposing that you think about building rental fees. We take in between that in FY '24, it was almost $35,000 in building rental. This year it's $40,000. We have seasonal rentals, we have other rentals. It's not a huge amount, but I think it's something worthwhile to have the committee look at, to see if there's a benefit there in increasing those rental fees. And so, really, this is where we are. We are in a place where we have to think about the increased fees and the impact of either increasing fees or not, because that will have a real impact on the number of staff that we have to reduce, because no matter which way we slice it, we need to get to a place where we are reducing at least $1.2 million in school funds. So that's where we are as of today, and so open for questions, ideas. I told the staff that this is a collaborative effort amongst everyone, the town, school committee, leadership, and the educators. And I also want to say just very publicly that we have been really collaboratively working with the town, and they are being very supportive of our efforts. And we look to continue to have those conversations.
Thank you, Superintendent Shannon. So in acknowledgement of the late start of the meeting and also the fact this is the first initial presentation of this budget, which we'll be discussing for several meetings, certainly take some brief comments or limited questions at this point, because I think that's a lot of information that everyone has got. Probably absorb a little bit. But Mr. Carr, I don't know if you have anything, just moving around in alphabetical order.
Your presentation was excellent.
Okay, Mrs. Hannah, do you have anything at this point in time? Mrs. Leskey?
Very appreciative. I think this was, I appreciate the approach and how comprehensive this was. No questions. I need to digest.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
And I'd just like to note that our superintendent actually spent a great deal of time on this presentation, and I think this might be the fourth time that you have presented it this week.
Yes.
It's the fourth time I've seen it, so which is good, right? We
Yeah.
need to know this well.
Yeah.
But thank you, because it was, Ms. Leskey's correct. That was really, really well done. It was put together properly and I think logically, and it's very intuitive. So it leaves us with a lot to think about. So thank you very much. We'll move right into the next block of the agenda, which is block the superintendent updates, and hopefully Superintendent Shannon can give sort of a brief update, and then move right into the district calendar discussion that we have and
Yep.
vote.
I have a very brief update. So first, I want to say that it's National School Counselor Week. So we want to thank all of our counselors for all they do for all of our students and staff. And I want to give a shout out to Allison Batista, who is a high school counselor who won the Rising Star Award at the Massachusetts School Counselors Association. And this award this award winner, so Allison, is a model for new counselors demonstrating the highest standard of professional competence, outstanding contributions to the school community and profession, and has demonstrated strong rapport with students, parents, and the school personnel. So congratulations to Ms. Batista. I also would like to congratulate the high school and especially Coach A, because he has been sort of the person behind a lot of this work. Their application has been selected to be nominated to the U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon School. So we're currently awaiting further instruction from the federal program, and we'll keep everybody apprised of where we are, but who knows, at some point, we could be both a blue and a green ribbon school. So very excited about that. And so if you're all set, I'm ready to move into calendar.
Okay, let's go.
Okay,
Thank you.
so you have two calendars in front of you. And we are looking to hopefully vote for one calendar this evening. So draft one, actually, I'm gonna say both calendars.
Can I just pause you for 1
Yes.
minute, Superintendent? Dr. Scollins, do you have access to the PDF copy from the agenda materials while Superintendent Shannon is speaking? Or if you want to do
I
it,
can just
it might help just to put them up there.
Yes, let me pull it up, hold on. Give me-
Sorry, there's actually a decent amount of people watching.
No,
tonight,
that's
so-
fine. Okay. Let's get the other one up. Share my screen. Okay, so both calendars have the same first day of school. So students in grades 1 through 12 will start school on September 2nd. Our kindergartners will start on September 3rd, and our pre-Kers will start on September 8th. Both calendars have a full 2-week winter recess for our students and families, with December 22nd, that Monday, being a professional development day for staff. Both calendars. Nope, I'm not going to say that. The first calendar, so option 1, has Good Friday listed as an early release day, with the last day of school being June 17th. The second calendar, sorry, it's blocking my ability to switch screens. The second calendar has Good Friday as a no school day due to operational challenges, with the last day of school being June 18th. And so those Good Friday options and the last day of school are the two differences, and that is really what we're deciding. Oh, yes. The other thing that I do want to mention is that though you may be voting on a calendar tonight, due to some of the recent news coming out of Washington, DC, we are waiting to hear some from state government, Massachusetts state government, around some potential changes to federal and state holidays. If state holidays change, we may have to revisit some of this calendar, but we don't have enough information to make any decisions about that now. But I do think it is prudent to move forward with this decision. So this is our starting point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and any adjustment won't be too severe, I don't think, so we'll be able to make that, but I think I agree, it's prudent to move forward at this point with a vote. We've talked about it a number of times at prior meetings, so at this point, just go around in alphabetical order as we always do, and ask for any comments or questions for the superintendent or any member of the administration that's present, and then eventually we'll entertain a motion for a vote when everyone feels that they've had an adequate opportunity to be heard. And I'd encourage anyone that is watching at home that might have an opinion or a position or perspective to share to please just chime in. I'm monitoring the Q&A feature on Zoom, so we'd love to hear from you. Mr. Carr.
No questions, just observation. I think both calendars are very well thought through.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Ms. Hannon?
No questions. I have had them answered in the past, so.
Ms. Zaleski?
Operationally, is the challenge that there are not enough students in attendance or there are not enough teachers in attendance for the curriculum to move forward? Or both?
I think at this point it is both.
Okay.
What I have tried to discover but cannot ascertain is so which came first. But I think now we are at a place where it is both, especially at the secondary level and becoming more so at the elementary level with each passing year.
Superintendent Shannon, I wonder, because I think we were taking survey responses even beyond
We were,
the last meeting. So I wonder if it makes sense to just bring those up
I can do
and
that.
share them with everyone at home as well as the
Yes.
members of our school committee.
Yeah, so we are at 552 responses total. And 46.4 of the responses are saying a half day.
46.4%.
Yes. And 27.9% are saying no school altogether. Do you want to know numbers of people? Because it doesn't
Who's,
tell me
who,
that.
and what's the percentage of,
Of full
of
day?
yes,
You know what? I'm gonna just share my screen
That'd
so
be great.
that everyone
Thank
can
you.
see this. Hold on. Sorry, I have a lot of tabs open. There you go. Is that big enough?
yes.
So 46.4 are saying a half day of school on Good Friday, 27.9 are saying no school, 25.7 are saying a full day of school.
And then as to the, you already sort of made the decision with the winter break because it was like an overwhelming response. So both
Yes.
options present that 2-week vacation,
That was this was the data from the December break.
And the only issue there was the teachers,
Yes,
request that we consider maybe different professional development days, which don't impact the families.
Correct.
And so that, okay, so if we could scroll back down to that, yeah.
and I don't know if it's helpful, but this 46% is 256 responses. This one for the no school is 154, and for full day is 142.
So to me, and if anyone has any comments now, just jump in. But to me, I mean, the survey was extremely helpful guidance in making this decision. Even with this, where it's a little bit more split, clearly there's a response, a choice that most people selected or agreed on. So personally, I would just adhere to the guidance of those that I represent, and I would personally favor going with the half day for Good Friday. But I don't know where everyone is at. So that's just my personal perspective, but I would ask for a motion to approve one of the two calendars, and then obviously that motion would need a second, and then it would need to pass. So if anyone has any sort of, as the chair, I'm not going to make the motion. But if anyone has a calendar that they would like to see voted on, please move at this time.
Move to vote on 2.
So draft 2. That is the calendar that presents Good Friday as a no school day. Okay, there's been a motion to vote on draft 2. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, hearing no second, there will be no vote taken on that motion. So that only leaves us with one other option. So I'm guessing maybe 2 other committee members would move for that calendar, one of you. Or perhaps you guys don't like either option.
I guess I'll move it.
Okay, so the motion for draft one, Mr. Carr?
That includes.
Half day.
Okay, yes, so there's been a motion.
Draft one.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve draft one of the calendar, which presents Good Friday as a half day and leaves the last day of school on June 17th. Is there a second to that motion to approve draft one of the calendar?
I'll second that.
Okay, there's no pressure, Ms. Leskey.
No.
Okay, motion's been seconded by Ms. Leskey. So all in favor, we'll do a roll call. Mr. Carr,
Aye.
Ms. Hannah,
Can I voice my concern or?
Sure, sure.
I think the only thing is we just went through an extensive reason, like we're in a major deficit. And the last time we talked about this, there's significant savings by closing the school because of the lack of students in this building and the major increase in having to have substitutes. And so there's a significant savings, and to go through this and then kind of ignore the fact that there's significant savings. And if you put students first and they're not in school, then I don't know why we open the building.
Okay, because we've already made the motion and it's already been seconded.
Yeah.
I'm still gonna go through with the vote, and I'd ask you for some vote, Ms. Hannah, if you want to vote for, against, or abstain, it's up to you. Otherwise, I,
I'll vote against, but that.
okay, so nay.
Nay.
Ms. Leskey,
I'm voting for, but with the caveat that I hope we continue this conversation in subsequent years around the quality of education, that if there is a half day and the school is open, that it's being used for educational purposes, not as a short little visit to school before everyone heads off on a long weekend, or that, to really pay attention to the attendance data, both in terms of cost, but also in terms of educational value. And that I also personally feel really strongly about the separation of schools from religious observations. However, given the situation that we're in, I also think our job is to educate students, and the students need to be here. And looking at the data, I'm hoping that families will be here and that teachers will be here and find ways to celebrate or observe Good Friday outside of the school hours.
okay, so just to recap so far, Mr. Carr is aye, Ms. Hannah is nay, Mrs. Leskey is,
Aye.
okay. Craig
With my
McClellan.
caveat, just for public record.
Craig McClellan, aye. Thank you, Mr. Leskey. Motion carries by a majority vote of 3 members to 1 nay and 1 member who is not present. So Superintendent Shannon, we'd ask that you please implement that calendar for the upcoming academic year. Ms. Leskey, great point. And frankly, I think this is an example of something we review constantly, because Good Friday was formerly a school day, and it didn't seem to be working. So it's now going to be a half day. So if that doesn't work, then there may be a demand to revisit that. I think Ms. Hannah's observations were absolutely valid. And I don't know, if they would have changed anyone's position. But, it's just because of procedure, we had to move forward with the vote because it had already been seconded, that motion had been seconded. But I think that was a really good comment to make. Okay,
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
The point that you just made, Ms. Leskey, about early release days and turning into some long weekends and things, I think that's something that I think we will revisit in general, because the elementary schools specifically have been keeping some really interesting data. And we're finding that even outside of the Good Friday, those early release days, we have a significant number of students who are absent. And when you add up all of that time, that's a lot of lost academic time, and our teachers are really doing a good job trying to make those days valuable. But when we have large numbers of students absent, it becomes difficult. And so I think it's something that you'll see coming out in some school newsletters, because we can't teach students who aren't in their seats. And so even a half day is a really valuable academic day. So thank you for raising that.
Well, I think it's also really hard for teachers to move curriculum forward.
is.
If you have a lesson plan that's a critical,
Yeah.
critical lesson to the curriculum, if you have only 70% of your seats filled, you're going to need to reteach that
Exactly.
at some other time, and I think it impacts all kids.
It does. Yes.
So.
All right, well, let's move on to the next block of the agenda, which is block F, and is our teaching and learning section. Tonight, we have a presentation from our Director of Student Services, Mr. Michael Stapleton. And we also have our CPAC liaison, Sarah Davis, in the audience, who I would ask to please come and join us at this time. Mr. Stapleton.
So I have a brief presentation tonight. It's really just a data sharing update, as I do, at the meetings that I attend. So we had a very busy month in January of 2025 to kick off the new year. At the elementary level, there were 7 annual review meetings. There were 4 reevaluations, all of which the students were found eligible for special education. There was 5 initial evaluations, 6 initial evaluations. 5 students were found eligible. 1 student was found not eligible. 5 requests did come from families, and then 1 came through the MTSS process. There was 1 class of resident private school evaluation that was completed, and then 1 independent evaluation that was reviewed. At the secondary level, there were 4 annual review meetings. There were 9 reevaluations, which was a lot of work on the staff. So I thank them for that dedication to completing those reevaluations. There were 2 initial evaluations. 1 was found eligible, and that came through the MTSS process. And then out of district, there was 1 reevaluation meeting where that student was found eligible. So you'll see the total of 34 meetings in the month of January. And then moving to the next, request from the school committee to monitor IEP acceptance rate. So this was September through December, but then for the month of from September 1st to January 31st, we're at 106 accepted IEPs. Based on how the meetings have fallen, there's 13 IEPs being written, and then we still await 35 responses from families within that 30-day window. Families have to respond to IEPs. So again, another very positive and successful month for student services for special education.
Thank you, Mr. Stapleton. That concludes your brief report. Okay, and any input from our Special Education Parents Advisory Council, Ms. Davis? No pressure?
No pressure. We had a great meeting last month. And Michael reported on all of our different types of programming for special ed in Cohasset, and it was awesome. It was actually really thorough, and I think any parents who want to know should go online because you posted it, right?
Yeah, it'll be on the website.
And look it up. I feel like I learned some things as well. So it was a good meeting. We had a lot of people turn out, and we had some good conversations.
Did he turn the heat on for you this time?
We weren't in that room.
That's just super important too. We consider, what Superintendent Shannon presented about as we consider the budget and those components, how we can build out programming too, and knowing what strengths we have right now, where there's areas for improvement, and how we built those up over the years. I think that's just important to have CPAC understanding and parents aware of what program we offer, and then areas for growth as well.
Yeah, we learned a lot about the co-teaching model. I think some parents didn't really know much about that, so that was great. I'll be interested to see what you do going forward, programming.
Okay, Ms. Davis, any, from the parents' perspective, family's perspective, I should say, any constructive criticism about anything right now, common themes, anything you're seeing that you'd like me to be aware of?
I think so. Off the top of my
Again, no
head.
pressure, you can always contact us, so, I'm just
Let me
asking this
know.
off the top of your head right now, but
We do have a meeting coming up, so I'll let you know.
can you tell me when that is, because I'd like to go?
It is, we're doing it after the February vacation, so it's the Thursday after. It's gonna be off campus. Should be
The 27th,
Yeah,
is it 11?
I have to check the time. I'm not sure. We're having a presenter, so.
Okay, well, it'd be wonderful if you
I'll
could
send it
text me
out.
that, can
And
you?
yes, so I'll text it to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Mhm.
Any questions from the committee members or anyone participating virtually for our Director of Student Services and or our CPAC representative? Goodbye, principals. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Mr. Stapleton, would you be able to speak to, or just provide a little color if it's possible around with the elementary column where there were 5 family referrals and 4 of those kids were eligible.
Mhm.
I mean, that seems like high to me. Like all of a sudden, here we are mid-year. I don't know if that's parents looking at their kids all of a sudden, but that those kids weren't scooped up by the MTSS at this point. I'm just wondering if there's anything else you can say. I understand that there may not be in this type of
Yeah,
form, but
so I think I can speak kind of broadly to that answer. So I think at the lower levels, Principal Gaudette being new and like kind of my work with MTSS and like refining that process, full transparency, that's something I'm still working on in this role and really getting down there to see that. So I think that's what I would attribute that to is like, calibrating with the new principal, some new personnel down there, really like navigating that process. But I would say that I think we've been responsive through this, right, by, moving forward the evaluations and determining that eligibility. And so I think that's really that piece at the Osgood level. And again, 5 does seem like a lot, but like in the scheme of, grade levels and percentages that we're at, I see that, being something that I definitely want to keep an eye on, but not overly alarming. That makes sense.
great, thank you.
Thank you. That was my question as well. So that's cool. Anyone else? Yeah. Strong. Okay.
Thank you for all the work you're doing. Appreciate it. It's making a difference.
Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you. And that was a great budget presentation. I enjoyed it. It was a little stressful, but I liked it.
All right. Moving on to block G, reports from any subcommittee assignments or liaison roles. Anyone, you can just fire at will.
I got you.
Oh, here we go.
All right.
Leslie.
The Cohasset High School Council met last week. And I'll just keep it short. I'll just let you know what we talked about. Mr. Scott reviewed the budget proposals and some of the impacts. And I think that what makes the high school council really interesting is that students participate as well. And so I think it's great that our students are beginning to sort of understand also how their school district works. There was some discussion about scheduling and new courses, which was a proactive move by the high school in anticipation of some budget decisions needing to be made and sort of knowing how students were going to choose their courses for next year and what sort of staffing would be needed. There was discussion of the competency determination approval, which is related to the MCAS and graduation business that we go about a while ago. Cell phone task force update. It was great to hear from the students again, just about how they were experiencing the first week of the cell phone away for the day. And then talking about how to brainstorm around having difficult conversations as a community, mostly around the topic of race. So that was absolutely fantastic. And then a quick update from the CEF in the fall. They gave almost $87,000 to the schools across all 4 schools with some amazing grants. They are looking to add board members. So if you are interested in serving on that really fun board, speak to one of the current members, or you can go on their website and you'll see their email address on there. The phone-a-thon, pick up your phone, your home phone, which almost never rings, March 3rd and 4th. The CF is looking for donations at that point. They'll also have the spelling bee in May on the 19th, 20th, and 21st for grades 3 and 5. And teachers who are listening, spring grants are due on the 5th of April. So we're very appreciative of the CF and all that they do for our schools, especially as budgets get tighter. And to our community for supporting the CF, because it allows them to do what they do as well.
I still do not know a contact for food service or the wellness committees,
Okay.
or if I'm supposed to be having been in meetings for either of these.
So for wellness, February 11th, maybe you're not on those.
I'm
Yeah, make sure you're on. So February 11th at 2:00.
Okay.
And it'll be in the community room, but I'll send you.
thinking, yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Have it with select. No, you haven't. He was out. I was out. So it was just one meeting at the very beginning of the year. Okay.
I don't call, say offhand, who is on the food services committee with you.
I am.
Okay. So,
Sorry.
You would just basically coordinate, that was like an ad hoc committee created when we wanted to reevaluate or, take a deeper dive into the food services. And the meetings are all initiated by the committee members and it's through the superintendent. Usually we would notify superintendent that we wanted to, it was not at the time Superintendent Shannon or Superintendent Sullivan, that we would want to have a food services meeting, and usually Ms. Owen was involved, and then obviously Mr. Cordone, who is the Director of Food Services, and usually that takes place, it can take place anywhere. Oftentimes it takes place at one of the schools during lunch service, and a lot of times you eat lunch there to see what's going on, see how it's served. So it's actually a great committee, but I don't think it's met at all this year. But it probably could, because now Mr. Cordone has been here for a full calendar year, and he's done a lot, slightly more than a calendar year now. He's done a lot, so maybe it's time to, I don't know, sit down with him and figure things out. I know that elementary was always that was still like the developing side. He had done a lot of things immediately with the secondary building. And I think that he's done a good deal with the elementary in terms of sort of streamlining the service and maybe offering a wider array of healthier options. But yeah, it's sort of like up to you guys when you feel like it, and there's zero pressure. So just, between the two of you.
Perfect.
Anything else, Mr. Carr? Do you have one?
Nope.
Nothing from Mr. Carr.
Nope.
Okay. I met with Superintendent Shannon as part of the superintendent eval process, our mid-year check-in, and found that Superintendent Shannon is well on her way to accomplishing all goals that she presented at the beginning of the year. There's adequate evidence in terms of like what she has been doing to accomplish those goals and fulfill strategic objectives or initiatives. We will be, every one of us will be asked to fill out a form that I will distribute to the committee at the end of the year, because one of our major roles as school committee members is to evaluate the operational head of our school district, which is the superintendent. And it is done on a specific form. Traditionally, we presented that in July. Superintendent Shannon has asked that we do that earlier this year. So I will circulate those in May, because they always take a long time for everyone to do. It really isn't that burdensome, but you do need to like set aside an hour to sit down and do it and take it seriously. And there's a little bit of like a rubric to it. So, but we have like, you have last year's that's already been published, so you can use that as guidance to see how it's done. I'm also happy to answer any questions, but just letting you all know that that is coming down the pike. That's all. So unless there's anything else, move on to the last block or penultimate block of the agenda, school committee governance. Do not have any topics not reasonably anticipated that I know of. Anyone have any topics that I don't know about?
I would like to propose creating a subcommittee for athletics. I think it's been brought to my attention that, really like the community is scared to speak out in retaliation of their children. And so most of our kids play sports, and the success of our teams have been masked, have been actually masking the operational concerns of the department. And I think it's time that we dig in on it and just understand more of, how, coaches are hired, how they're fired. There's questions around the safety protocol policies and scheduling of the athletic competitions and everything. And so the list kind of goes on, and kind of what I've heard around and what I've been feeling and everything. And so I'd like to propose that we move forward with a committee kind of focused on the athletic department.
Yeah, anyone have any comments on this?
I'm in support of it.
So, Mrs. Hannah and Superintendent Shannon and Athletic Director Rotundi and I met several months ago now, keeping in line with just ensuring that every element of the district is getting the attention it deserves, is, has the resources it needs, that we're evaluating all room for improvement and innovation within each, department of the school. And we just had a meeting relative to athletics. And so, I mean, I think that, I certainly, am in favor of having school committee oversight. We did this with the food services. And I think that ideally I would like to I had tried to post this on the agenda for this meeting, and I didn't because it just wasn't posted in time. And so I didn't anticipate a discussion tonight about it. I'm glad Mrs. Hannah brought it up. One thing I felt like it not being posted was a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because from the food services endeavor, I learned that sometimes the rollout can have the way we roll out that sort of at the committee level can have like unintended consequences. So, I mean, I guess so. Ms. Hannah, are you proposing that we establish that tonight, right here and now?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, it's been proposed by one of us, and I think that it warrants some discussion if someone is looking to do that. I think it's driven by a desire to make sure that we're providing all departments with all the resources they need. So I don't know, what are people's feelings on it?
Next, I'm sitting here trying to remember, what do we generally do on new committee rollout? What
do we do?
What do we, whenever we want one, we vote on it and we do it, or do we vote? How do we?
So ordinarily, so what we did with, and all I can do, Mr. Carr, is I don't know if there's a real policy to this. I mean, I think that the school committee can establish whatever subcommittees it wants to have. We, from memory, we sort of established it wasn't officially a subcommittee, because that's usually done when we're reconstituting the committee, but it's like an ad hoc committee, right? So with the food services, we established this committee that, the 2 members volunteered to sit on, and then we would meet, discuss the department, discuss needs, discuss wants, and then from that came the suggestion that we formally create a subcommittee, right? So when the time came for that, it wasn't done in media res. I don't know that I don't know if there's any rule to follow. I must admit, so I got to concede that I'm not sure if there's some sort of proper procedure with that. But the committee is certainly welcome to form some sort of offline non-quorum committee to, I would say that it almost always would need to involve the superintendent of schools if we were going to do that, because if it looks at any sort of operational facet of the school district, I mean, it has to, but we can't just unilaterally, I think, approach that without her involvement. I don't think that would be appropriate. And I think that it would be maybe it would be counterproductive to do that too, because I think it would be met with some maybe it would be received in a manner that maybe it wasn't intended to be received if we did that. So I think it could just mirror and this was always my thought on it. It would just mirror the food service issue that we did. We just saw that something that may have been not given the amount of attention that maybe other departments have been given for a period of time. And so we said, well, why don't we take a look at it? And from that, we ended up having this, professional chef leading the department, and people are raving about kids are raving about the pizza. I mean, almost every meeting, I feel like we're talking about the food services department, how wonderful it is. So, I think there's value to it.
Yeah.
And so Mrs. Hannah has proposed that, we form. So I guess what I would do is just ask, if there's 2, I imagine Mrs. Hannah is volunteering herself to sit on it. So if there's like another member that would join her in that effort, and then that can be coordinated with the superintendent to start. And then I think that like a thought partnership there can happen in terms of like how it can, because the danger in these, and I'll speak, like the danger with these things, right, is that the school committee's overall purview, right, there's like three primary things. Evaluating our superintendent, developing policy, and overseeing the budget. Depending on the district, school committees vary in terms of their involvement in operational matters. Our district currently, and has for as long as I've been on the committee, been fairly involved in operations. Now, of course, the superintendent is always the one making operational decisions, but we are thought partnering with the superintendent a lot. I've been chair of the committee with Superintendent Shannon, twice with Superintendent Sullivan, and all those experiences as the sort of, conduit. I've been very involved with, sort of operational discussions, not decisions. Like we're not, the school committee isn't making necessarily operational decisions, the superintendent is, but so, this would be one of those instances where we would be, injecting ourselves into the operations of the school. So my point in mentioning that is that it can sometimes be received as, people may interpret it the wrong way. I've said this before in open meeting, staff can get their hackles up, feeling that the school committee is targeting them unfairly or suggesting that they're doing a bad job. I don't feel that that's ever why we're doing something like this. It's because we're just 5 people that have volunteered at a time to represent the best interests of all the stakeholders, and we're trying to do that job as effectively as possible and make sure that everyone's getting the resources they need, and we're delivering the best possible experience to the kids.
Yeah.
Right. And to date, our superintendents have been really receptive of that and have been willing to thought partner with us. Some superintendents aren't, right? We've been fortunate, but that's also part of the deliberate hiring process that we have as well. I mean, it's overt questions that we ask the candidates. So we just have to be cognizant of that and respectful of the fact that if you're working here, right, I think that the nature of school committees in itself can be a little bit off-putting. Just to provide some sort of, extreme example. I'm a lawyer. If I worked in an organization where, and sometimes there are educators in the school committee, but predominantly it's people from all different walks of life. If I had to be governed by a board of folks that weren't lawyers and I felt like they were sometimes overstepping, that may bother me. So we just have to be respectful of that and cognizant of that sometimes that's how it's interpreted, and it's not even though it's not meant to be, there may be some unintended consequences of that. So yeah, I mean, I'm always all for doing that. I mean, I'm always all for these sort of like ad hoc committees. I think it adds value. It just needs to be, I think, approached in the right way so that we're not like from the outset dealing with people that, engaging with people that have already, they're feeling attacked, right? So, yeah, would anyone else volunteer to serve on the athletics sort of ad hoc committee?
I'd be glad to.
To work with Ms. Hannah and Superintendent Shannon and figure out what that's going to look like?
Are you interested?
If you have bandwidth, Ted, that's great. If you do not, you can call me up and I can sub in.
I'm also willing to, so whatever. Would you like to do it, Mr. Carr?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so why don't Ms. Hannah and Mr. Carr contact Superintendent Shannon
We'll do that.
in the not too distant future and figure out, collaborate on how this is going to be launched.
I think too, this department is also one that serves so many students, uses is a big budget consideration. And for those 2 reasons in and of itself, I think it is good for us to all be fully informed on the sort of operations of it.
I think athletics is one of those areas. I truly believe that it's a major part of the district, right? It's just outside of the walls a lot of times. It's at the classroom also. We're thinking about it a lot. And it can easily go you know, you know, without getting the attention that it might deserve, right? So, you know,
I think it gets a lot of attention, right? I mean, as Mr. Guile put at one point, like, you know, I think he was concerned that athletes get more attention than others. And I think my concern is this, is that we have, we have very successful sports teams, right? On paper, out on the field, we have successful sports teams. I don't think that the athletes are necessarily getting the support and getting the, you know, the safety protocols that they deserve and that actually are part of their rights. And so for that, and I think as well with like coaching staff and all of that, like really treating coaching staff and really thinking about the hires of those coaching staffs, because those kids are actually with those coaches, maybe more so than with teachers, depending on the blocks of the schedule and everything. And so those coaches are incredibly important for the growth of our students and the wellness of our students. And I think when you hit the athletic field versus when you're in a structured classroom, like it is fairly unstructured in the sense that you're doing different things and being tested in different ways and everything. And if that's not done by somebody who is a trained professional in doing it, it can actually have some really negative consequences. And so there are a lot of concerns from that standpoint. You know, we scheduled 3 basketball games in the middle of midterms this year for our girls. And so like, we're about students first and, you know, but then we sit there and we put them in a situation where they've got to play 3 games and they also have to do all their midterm exams. Like things like that are just not being thought through right now. And so I, you know, again, it might not be that the department's getting the support they need. So that's really where this is coming from, is like, let's understand what the struggles are and, you know, and give them the support that they need in order to be successful. But I think the fact is like, I mean, one coach got fired this year because they brought forward complaints, safety complaints. And, you know, unfortunately, like we're sitting here and those have supposedly been taken care of, but like there's been no outward communication of how they've been taken care of. And, you know, these parents deserve that. And these students deserve that, to be able to go out on a field and know that they're going to be taken care of, to be able to go out on a field and know that they don't have to practice in a lightning storm. And all of that is something we owe to them as a school committee as well, that their kids are going to be safe with us. And so that's where this is coming from.
yeah, so when I said it didn't get the attention, certainly athletics have a great deal of awareness here, right? I'm talking about attention at the committee level, like we have a student services update every other meeting, right? That didn't happen before. We put more of a spotlight on student services as well before Mr. Stapleton was the director. So that's what I mean, right? So, and that's why I think that sometimes, you know, highlighting different facets of the district, like student services, like food services, and giving it attention at this level, that it might not have gotten it before.
Yeah.
Certainly at the popular level, athletics has a lot of attention and awareness because most, as you said, most people's kids play one or more sports, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. So I agree. Yeah. So, okay. So great. All right. Any other topics that anyone had that I was not aware of?
Could I just say that
Sure.
I did, not to counter anything, I think our students currently who play sports are safe on fields, and I would not want this to come across as if we have a major safety issue. Because I think that could create other issues.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, I thank you for that. I understand what you're saying. And I think, you know, I think everyone's perspective is valid, and, you know, I think that this is a positive thing, you know, and I think good only comes from when we do this. There may be some growing pains there, but I truly believe that these types of efforts have improved the district over at least the years that I've been on the committee. It's just that the approach, I think, has been refined over time. I think it's going to be a positive thing. So thank you, Mrs. Hannah. Any approval of minutes?
Oh, that's me, sorry. No, but I will turn them back to the district by Friday. I'm almost done with the edits, and Kathy Bond continues to be amazing. She is saved my bacon on many occasions. It's me who is a little delayed, so I will have those turned back by Friday. So we can vote on two.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
We're still well in compliance of notes.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Future agenda items, anyone? I was gonna suggest that we put athletics on there, but Hannah just took care of that. No? Okay, so we do have a reason to move into executive session tonight pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30, Capital A, Section 21. Reason number 3 under subsection A of Section 21 is to engage in strategy surrounding collective bargaining, negotiations, and or litigation, same exception. So is there a motion? We'll need to do this in a roll call to move into executive session for the reason I just stated and to not move back into open session to adjourn from the executive session.
Second.
Motion's been made by Ms. Leskey. It's been seconded by Ms. Hannah. All in favor, please indicate so in a roll call. Mr. Carr,
Aye.
Mrs. Hannah,
Aye.
Ms. Leskey.
Aye.
Fred McClellan, aye. Motion carries by unanimous vote of the members present. We are hereby in executive session. Thank you, everyone who joined us both virtually and in person tonight. Have a very nice night.